Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to the courageous Vaughn Manor, where it's time for my weekend reading report. It's a special weekend report this week. It's special, mostly because I've got a couple things to announce, thrilling things as usual, and you know, my reading this week wasn't all that. It wasn't all that. Frankly, because, this week has been busy. It's been busy this week. So, I've got some special announcements having to do with this winter. That's right, winter is coming. Winter is coming. Actually, winter is always coming unless it's winter. If it's winter, it's winter. But every other time, winter is coming. And winter is coming. It's coming soon. And I have a couple of exciting things to talk about here on the channel that Roger and I will be doing. And everything I've read this week, which frankly isn't much, and there were a couple things that showed up here at the Manor. A couple things showed up. But let's start off with the startling announcements. The startling announcements. Okay, let's talk about winter. So, let's talk about the biggest, well, physically the biggest. Let's talk about the biggest thing heading our way at the Manor this winter, which will be happening in January. In January, it'll be time to read this. Yes, it's Ambuary. It's Amber-airy. Ambuary. In January, I'll be reading the complete, well, I actually don't know if I'll finish it, but I'll start it. I'll be reading the Great Book of Amber. The Great Book of Amber. This has Roger Zelazny's complete Amber Chronicles in here. So this is 10 books. 10 books in one. And the reason that I decided to finally read this book is because I watched a video yesterday by Grammaticus, and on this video, and the video is a review of the first 5 books in the Chronicles of Amber that Grammaticus did. And so I watched that, and in the video, he said he's going to talk about the Chronicles of Amber, which no other booktuber dares do. Apparently, it's a matter of courage. Bookpilled has not done this. And that could be true. I don't think I've ever seen Bookpilled talk about the Chronicles of Amber, but I don't know if it was because of a lack of courage or just interest. Who knows? Steve Donahue, Grammaticus said, has not done this. Although Steve Donahue has talked about the Chronicles of Amber at least twice and probably more than that. And then he got to me. And then Grammaticus said, and Michael K. Vaughn, hasn't read or talked about the Chronicles of Amber, even though he's promised to do it for years, and it would knock 10 books off of his 500 book challenge. What a dumbass Michael K. Vaughn is. Actually, Grammaticus didn't say that. He didn't call me a dumbass. He just implied it. Anyway, he's right. He's right. I mean, not about me being a dumbass. And like I said, he didn't say it out loud. But he is right. I have been talking about this book for years, and I haven't read it. Mostly because I've had lots of other things to read, and this is, well, it's gigantic. It's, how much? How many pages is this? This is 1,200 and it's about 1,250 pages. So it's a big book. And in January, I'm actually going to read it. Or most of it. It'll probably go into February. So this is Ambuary. This is one of the things I will be doing. Because, you know what? Grammaticus, his review of this book, or half of this book anyway, was really good. It's a good video. I'll link it down below. It's a good video. Yeah. And he convinced me. He was like, I was thinking, yeah, I really need to read this book. So, yeah. I'm going to read this book. You could watch Grammaticus's video about the Chronicles of Amber. I'm not going to it's not like Sumerian September when I'm just inviting everybody to read it. But if you want to join me, you can. It's a lot though. It's a lot. But if you want to, sure, read some Amber. Why not? I'm going to in January. But that's not the only thing going on this winter. Because Gareth Howells, the great Gareth Howells, who runs the channel Books, Songs, and Other Magic. Gareth Howells, who wrote this book of poetry, Voices of the City. Voices of the City, it's available by Gareth Howells. It's a great book of poetry. Gareth Howells, who's also a singer-songwriter, which is probably why the poetry's so good. Gareth Howells, who has a fantastic booktube channel, as I said, is doing an event. And his event is the Winter of Windom. The Winter of Windom, which is all about John Wyndham, the great science fiction author John Wyndham. And Gareth Howells is going to be reading, for every month in winter, he'll be reading a book by John Wyndham. And he did a whole video on this. I will link that video down below. And I said, you know, I really like John Wyndham, and I have some books by John Wyndham that I want to read. So I'll do that. Why not? I was going to read this stuff anyway. And the way Gareth is doing it, I believe, is like I said, every month in winter, he will read a John Wyndham book, and that's how we do it. And we just have to decide which books we read. So for, December, January, February. Is March part of winter, or is March something else? I don't even remember. I don't remember. But I do have at least 3 books lined up, and I might read more than that, depending. Now, first of all, I have to read or reread, because I have read this book before, Day of the Triffids. I have to read Day of the Triffids, so I'll probably read this in December. Day of the Triffids. This is John Wyndham's most famous work, I believe. I did a video about this a while ago. A few booktubers have done some pretty good videos on Day of the Triffids, because it's an important work of science fiction, which has influenced all kinds of other things, including The Walking Dead and zombie films, even though there are not zombies in this. There are giant monster plants. They're giant monster plants instead of zombies. But it's a pretty great book, so I am going to read this again, because it's like, you can't, I feel like I can't do a John Wyndham event and not read Day of the Triffids, and I want to read it again anyway, because it's been a long time, and I really like this book. So Day of the Triffids. But he also has this other super famous book, which is John Wyndham's The Midwichuckos. The Midwichuckos is his other really famous book. Every woman in town was pregnant. What happened in Midwich? What did happen? Every woman in town was pregnant. Roger, did you go to Midwich? This guy. What a Romeo. Anyway, Roger went to Midwich, and now everybody in Midwich is pregnant. I'm pretty sure that's how this story goes. And of course, there are a bunch of demon kids that show up, a few months later, or, well, let's just say they're not demon kids, I think. They're like alien kids or something. Who knows who the father is, but I'm pretty sure that's how this book goes. I've never read The Midwichuckos. I did see, was it Children of the Damned? There were a couple movies. Or was it Village of the Damned I saw? I can't remember which one of those. There were a couple movies based on Midwichuckos, and I can't remember which one I saw. I might have seen both of them. It's been a while. But I've never read the book. And so I'm going to read the book for this event. And then there's this other book, which is another one of his important books, apparently. This is The Kraken Wakes. The Kraken Wakes, with this really lame cover. This is not... I don't think this cover is particularly great, but this is the cover that I've got. This is from Penguin. This is The Kraken Wakes from Penguin. This guy doesn't seem all that concerned. He just seems like annoyed that it's... what is it, snowing? He's annoyed that it's snowing, and I don't know if that's what this book is about. Some guy who's annoyed because it's snowing. I tend to doubt it, but there we go. But then I've also got a couple books of short stories by John Wyndham, and I never hear anything about his short fiction. I've got The Infinite Moment by John Wyndham. Strange tales of men and women caught in the dimensions of time. And it has this awesome old 1960s science fiction paperback cover. So I might read this one, but I've also got Tales of Goose Flesh and Laughter by John Wyndham, a master of science fiction and fantasy. So there you go, Tales of Goose Flesh and Laughter, another cool old, I guess it's 1960s paperback. This has to be 60s, right? Has to be. Well, it's copyright 1956, but this looks like a 60s. This looks like a 60s paperback. So, yeah, there you go. So, Winter of Windom, that's another thing that's happening. And also, at the tail end of winter, after that stuff has all happened, finally, I will be reading all of the books in A Song of Ice and Fire, beginning with this book, A Game of Thrones. You might have heard of this series. It's dimly possible you've heard of this. George R.R. Martin's fantasy series. So I did read the first 2 books of this many years ago. And then I stopped because I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wait till George R.R. Martin finishes the series, and then I'm just going to read it all in one go. So this, as it turns out, was a bad idea because George R.R. Martin is never, ever going to finish this series. I don't care what he says, he's never, ever going to finish it. It's just a sad truth that I have come to accept. So I figure, well, there's no point waiting for a day that will never come. I will just finally read all of these books. I still haven't seen the television show. I did see the first episode of the television show. I did see the first episode, but I didn't see any others after that. And so I still, most of what happens in Game of Thrones, I don't really know what happens after the first 2 books. So a lot of it will be new to me. And it's frankly been years and years since I've read this one. I can't remember when this paperback came out, but it's been years and years since I've read this paperback book of A Game of Thrones. So yes, A Song of Ice and Fire, all there is of it, I will read at the tail end of winter after I read a bunch of other stuff. So there you go, and I will let you know what I think of the whole thing. So there's that. But what the hell have I been reading lately? What have I been reading? Well, I've been reading this book mostly, and I haven't read too much of it since last weekend. This is Stephen King and Peter Straub's The Talisman, and I am only on page 259 out of, man, how big is this damn book? 769 pages. So it's a big book. Stephen King and Peter Straub, The Talisman. And I'm enjoying this. It is very uneven. The writing is very uneven. Imagine that. But I'm enjoying the story. Even though, half the time we have a very well-written book, and the other half the time it seems like I'm reading a book that's written by somebody who's totally high on cocaine. But I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the whole thing, frankly. It says the ultimate experience in terror, but really it seems to be a fantasy novel with scary stuff that happens in it. It's a fantasy novel with scary stuff that happens. That seems to be what this is. And I had no idea, actually, what this was about. I can't really judge this yet, of course, because I'm only, a third of the way through it. Hopefully I'll read a lot more of it this week. Hopefully I'll have more time. I'm really going to read a lot of it tomorrow. I'm just going to sit down and read a ton of this book, I hope. Cross my fingers. But I am enjoying it. It is a good story. I suspect it'll end up being a good story in a book that is too long. But so far, I'm having a good time with it. Although, there are things about it, But I'll talk about all that stuff once I've finished reading it. So it'll be an interesting talk about this book that I have, Stephen King and Peter Straub's Talisman. So there you go. There's that. But another thing that I've been reading a lot of, if you've been watching my channel, you know this. I've been reading Thor. I'm reading every issue. In 1 year's time, I'm reading every issue of the original run of Thor, starting with Thor's time in Journey into Mystery, and then Journey into Mystery became Thor, and then the book lasted until the mid-90s when it was canceled. It was actually turned back into Journey into Mystery, but Thor wasn't in the book. So, the Thor title was canceled. It did come back a short time later with another #1 issue, but I'm just reading the first run, which it goes up to Thor. I keep forgetting to look this up, 502 or 3 or something. But I am still on the Journey into Mystery issues. And the point I'm at now is pretty great because Thor has become the Thor comic book that we all knew and loved. This is Thor issue 118. This is the issue that I'm reading next, which has the introduction of the indestructible destroyer. And at this point in the book, we have Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Vince Colletta is doing the inks now on the Thor strip, which I enjoy. Not everybody likes Vince Coletta's inks on Thor, but I like it. I like Vince Colletta on Thor quite a bit. And this is To Kill a Thunder God. We have the really super dramatic titles, and Asgard is now a huge part of this comic book. And so, yeah, it's really cool. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm at 100... Journey into Mystery, issue 118. He debuted in Journey into Mystery number 83. So this is the second Marvel Epic Collection that I'm on. So a couple things have shown up here at the Manor, so let's talk about those things. Another Epic Collection for my giant Epic Collection bookcase out there, and that would be Hawkeye Volume 2, which has Hawkeye stories from 1987 through 1989. Basically what this is from the Hawkeye stories from Solo Avengers. Solo Avengers had a Hawkeye story, and then as a backup, it would have a story about some other Avenger, and every issue would be a different Avenger in the back. Like this has Hawkeye and Mockingbird. The next issue has Hawkeye and somebody else. The Swordsman, I think, in the next one. No, the next one has Hawkeye and Captain Marvel. So basically, this is a Solo Avengers Epic Collection, which is cool. It's cool. I mean, I don't know that any of that stuff has been reprinted, actually. So this has Solo Avengers 1 through 20, and then it became Avengers Spotlight, so Avengers Spotlight 21. So a bunch of Hawkeye stuff from the 80s that I certainly haven't read since the 80s, so that's cool. And another thing I got was another volume of Creepy. This is Creepy Volume 3, collecting Warren's Creepy magazine, numbers 11 through 15. Great cover on this from Frank Frazetta, and just awesome interior artwork. Here we have a story from Steve Ditko. Bunch of great comic book artists did work in this comic book, including Steve Ditko, and so many others. And like I said, the covers were just awesome in Creepy. So Creepy Volume 3. There you go. And I think I didn't get any books in the mail this week. No books actually showed up here. I'm still on the 500 book challenge, so I can't buy any books for myself. But the challenge is going. It's humming right along. At least it would be if I wasn't reading the Talisman. But I am reading the Talisman, and like I said, I am enjoying this book. Okay, I guess that's everything. I guess that's everything I have to talk about. I will catch you next time.